Less Trump and more Jesus. That mixture of politics and religion fits perfectly what this weekend is. Not only was it Sibling Day on Thursday, Friday was the beginning of Passover, the main story in the Hebrew Bible, and today is Palm Sunday, which is the main story in the Christian narrative. Both of those events, Passover and Palm Sunday to Easter, are narratives in which the aspirations of people are intertwined with the political events of their day. Of course, the Hebrew people wrestling in resistance against Pharaoh, and in the Jesus story, the authorities, religious authorities and political authorities, both arresting Jesus for fear of his influence and then finally executing him on the cross. I'm Dwight Moody in the Meeting House. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to begin today with responding to a donor, to a listener. I'm going to do my Red Letter Bible study on the Palm Sunday events as described in the Gospel of Mark. I've got comments on two public and political events, court cases that are going on in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to end today with some personal comments and pictures about my three siblings. We gathered this weekend. I've had a wonderful time together. I want to talk more about that in a few minutes. Stay with me today. You know, one of the things I try to do each week is to respond to the people who write, who give, who ask questions, who send in comments from all over the country. And I want to respond today to a person who's not normally a listener to the Sunday morning program, but it has been a steady reader of my weekly commentary for many years. I call her donor number 60, but she has a name, Jean Smith, and I've known her for, I guess 20 years. She worked for the Lilly Endowment that has helped me over these 20 years, 25 years now, and she sent in a contribution this past week with a really sweet note, and I wrote a commentary about it because reading her note about the death and funeral of her brother, who was the first African-American justice on the Supreme Court of the United States. I read his Wikipedia article, and there was a story in there about the great basketball player from Louisville, Kentucky, Allen Houston, basketball player for Owensboro High School. I wrote all this up in my column this week. I hope you are a subscriber to it. You can go to our website at themeetinghouse.net, read that article, subscribe to that story that I wrote this week, and get all of the newsletters, all of the stories each week. You can even become a donor. We're waiting now for the next donation, which will be donor number 64. You remember my goal is to have 75 donors in response to my 75th birthday, which was that 2 weekends ago. Great, our red letter lesson today. Every week I try to have a red letter lesson, by which I mean focused on the red letters of the Christian New Testament. The New Testament, 27 documents, of course normally printed in black ink, but the words of Jesus are always, in some editions, printed in red ink. And I want us to focus on the words of Jesus. I think they are especially needed today as the Christian community in the United States is struggling with its own identity. A big part of it has gotten caught up in politics and has become identified with a political party. This in the long term and in the short term both has been damaging to the Christian identity and to the Christian ministry in the world. So I have tried to counter that, to offer an alternative version of what it means not only to be a Christian person, but to be part of the Christian community. I've tried to counter that by focusing on the red letters lessons, or the red letters of Jesus, what Jesus said, what he did, what he prayed. And after Easter, which is next Sunday, I'm going to start a series on the prayers of Jesus as we try to focus on the spiritual life of the individual, of you and me, and of everybody. But let's go back to what we now call Palm Sunday, the last week of Jesus' life. It's very interesting. The Gospel of Mark, which I've got open here, has 16 chapters. The chapters 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 all deal with this last week. Chapter 16, one chapter, treats the resurrection. But we've got these chapters 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, 5 chapters that deal with the last week in the life of Jesus. It begins, you remember, with him riding into town on a donkey, and the people gathering around and cheering him on, because many of them thought of him as a great prophet. They thought of him as a Messiah who would restore the great fortunes of Israel and relieve them from the oversight and domination of the Roman Empire. So they sang this song. It's a quote from Psalms: "Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed be the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, Hosanna." The events of the next week deal with Jesus goes into the temple and sees all of the commerce, how people are using religion to make money, and he famously overturns the tables of the money changers, claiming that they have violated the purpose of a holy spot. And he quotes here the prophet Isaiah, where God says, "My house," there the temple, "my house shall be called a house of prayer, not a house of commerce, not a house of business, not a house of politics, but a house of prayer for all people." The whole week he was sparring with the religious leaders. They challenged him, he challenged them to an understanding of what it means to be a follower of, in his case, the teachings of the Torah, which was the Hebrew Bible. And of course, there's the famous story of Jesus being anointed by the woman. She sensed that his death was coming, and she poured a perfume on his body, and the men there rebuked her, which of course continues to happen in Christian and religious circles, where when women try to do something, the men rebuke them. And when Jesus heard the rebuke of the men, this is what Jesus said to them. This is a quote: "Leave her alone. Leave her alone." 3 great words that more men need to listen to. When God inspires a woman to do something out of obedience to Christ, and the men want to shut her down, we need to say to these men, leave her alone. Let her do what God has called her to do, even if it is to preach and teach and lead and be empowered as a great follower of the Lord Jesus Christ. Then, of course, the next event is what we call the Last Supper, where Jesus gathered his disciples in an upper room on what is now called Mount Zion. I've been in that room many times. It was just a short stone's throw, literally, from where I was living in Jerusalem in 1973 and 74, right near the upper room. And then, of course, Jesus goes out into the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. Jesus had a place to pray. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. He had a prayer to pray as he tried to center himself amidst all the turbulence around him, as he tried to cope with the trauma that was overtaking the city of Jerusalem, the drama that was overtaking his own ministry and calling. He had to keep himself centered and strong and secure and steady, something that we need to do even in our own dramatic and traumatic times. Jesus prayed. There are three prayers, three features of prayer in this whole narrative, a week-long narrative, and I will talk more about that. But reading again on this Palm Sunday day, the events of that last week of Jesus is important for us to feel the danger that Jesus felt, to feel the uncertainty that Jesus felt, to feel the pushback that he had to the politics of his own day and the pushback that they had to him. The religious and political leaders of his time felt threatened by the popularity and teaching of Jesus, and this is why they conspired to kill him. This is my red letter lesson for today, how Jesus, on his mission, in the middle of political and religious turmoil, tried to stay faithful to what God had called him to do and to be the person God called him to be. We need to do that as well. This is a pattern for us in our own following of Jesus. We need to be red letter Christians. This is what I try to be. I try to evaluate everything in the religious and political world according to the red letters of what Jesus said, what he did, how he treated people, what his priorities were, what he called us to do. That's what I take as the guiding light of my own Christian life, because we live in a very dramatic and traumatic time, not only here in America politically, but we're watching things unfold around the world that are quite disturbing. We're watching two military powers. One is Israel bombing and overrunning the people of Gaza. And then we're watching Russia bombing and overrunning the people of Ukraine. And both of these are great injustices. They're great violations of the shalom of God. They are misrepresentations and misinterpretations of what power is meant to do in the world today. We are empowered to help people and not to hurt them. We are empowered to bless people and not to curse them. We are empowered to lift people up and to feed them and shelter them and receive them, especially if they are strangers. We are not empowered to bomb them and kill them and curse them and put a curse on them. And that's what's happening in both of those. And but we have to, in the midst of all this, it's easy to get caught up in the politics of it. We need to stay centered in our own self, in our own relationship with God, in our own spiritual journey. And I don't know what you've encountered on your journey this week. What surprise, what stress, what failure, what hurt, what disappointment, what great grief. I don't know what you're dealing with, but whatever it is, Jesus can help you stay centered, stay confident in God's purpose for you, God's purpose for you in the world, God's purpose for you to be an agent of blessing into the lives of people that are weaker than you and poorer than you, more desperate than you. You can be a source of strength and courage for them when you stand up with courage. When I stand up with courage, it helps other people be courageous in the face of their own trouble. God bless you as you seek to do this. That is, attend to what's going on on the inside as we are trying to cope with what's going on in the outside all around us. I remember years ago listening to the radio and hearing the story of a man fleeing Nazi Germany. And his testimony years later was this: I had never been to church in my life. I was not a Christian. My family had never been to church, and the only thing I knew was the Lord's Prayer. I don't know where I learned it. I don't know how it came to me, but in the dark of that night, riding on the train across war-torn Europe, I was trying to get out of Germany, through Romania, into France. All I could think to do was pray that prayer over and over and over again. I was not a Christian at the time, but God gave me that prayer to pray in the most desperate moment of my life. Maybe God will give you a prayer today to pray in the midst of some desperation in your own life. You know, when I think of desperation, I think of what's going on in our country, especially 2 court cases for my commentary today on public events. There are 2 court cases that I'm particularly interested in. One, when the president took office, he changed the policy of federal agents and empowered them to go into churches and into sanctuaries and arrest people that they thought were undocumented people. Not necessarily dangerous people, certainly not criminal people, but people who were undocumented. And for years, the policy had been that ICE agents and Secret Service and marshals would not go into churches, sanctuaries, at any time, least of all during a service of worship, to arrest people and put them in cuffs. But that policy was changed by the new president. And there are 3 court cases right now in federal court, one of them in Philadelphia, launched by the Quaker people. One of them in Washington, D.C., launched by what we call the mainline denominations, including my own, saying that this is a violation of the separation of church and state. I'm particularly interested in this case because the woman, the Christian woman, who argued this case last Friday, a week ago Friday, before the district judge, is a personal friend of mine. She's part of a prayer group that I meet with online on a monthly basis. And she has talked about this case with us and has prayed with us about her role as an attorney standing before a federal judge and arguing on behalf of Christian people and Jewish people and Muslim people to protect their worship spaces from the ICE agents coming in and disrupting things and arresting people. It's already happened in our country. It should not happen. The other court case is about this man, Garcia, who is a documented person. He is not a citizen, but he's a documented person and has orders from a federal judge from 2016 that he cannot be deported. He was swept up by ICE agents in a mistake. The federal government has admitted in court that this was a mistake. And he was put on that airplane and taken down to El Salvador and put in one of the worst prisons in our whole hemisphere. And now there's a great battle in court on the fundamental question of American life. Does a person living in America have a right to due process? Can the federal government sweep up people and run them out of country in the dead of night without a judge's order and a permission? Can they do that to you, citizen or no citizen? If they can do it to those people, they can do it to you. And this is a violation of the 14th Amendment. And the Supreme Court last week ruled 9-0 that the government, the Trump administration, had to go down there to El Salvador and bring that one man back. And now there's a little political and legal dance in the courtroom every single day as Trump and his people try to push back on that. We're going to see. You need to pray that the lawyers who are arguing on behalf of this innocent man prevail in the court of law, and that the government of our nation obeys the Supreme Court and brings back not this man, but all 375 of those people that they put down there without justification and without a judge's order. The question, you see, that these things raise is that will our democracy survive the current administration? Now, you know where I stand on this. My protest sign in the back: less Trump, less power to Trump, less attention to Trump, less sympathy for Trump, more power to Jesus. We need to pay attention to the values and the teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ, especially when it comes to innocent people like this and how they are treated. Jesus taught us specifically, this was last week, that we were to visit the people in prison and welcome the people who are strangers. That's the teaching of Jesus. That's what makes a country great. Now I want to take a few minutes and go back to my siblings. Thursday was Siblings Day. I didn't know about it until Thursday was there, but it just so happened that my three siblings, my brother David, my sister Dina, my sister Debbie, gathered this weekend in the mountains of North Carolina. And I've been with them. This is something that we started doing a few years ago after our father, Tom Moody, died in 2013. We had never done this really while our parents were alive, but after our parents died, we started getting together. And in the, 12 years since our dad died, we have met regularly. We have traveled overseas together. We've traveled in the United States together. And this has bonded us as a family. It's helped us to understand one another. You know, I have prayed many, many times, both privately and in the context of my own family and in public places, this prayer, that we might love and understand one another, not only in our nation, not only in our neighborhood, but also in our families. Many people live in fractured families. Many people live in toxic families, and some people have had to get away from their families because it was dangerous or toxic, and I honor this. But in our own time, in the last few months, politics has interfered with family life in far too many cases, where the families are split about how to understand what's happening and how to respond to it and how to be engaged in it. Some people like what's happening in Washington, and you know very well that I don't. I think it's a danger, not only to our nation and our democratic values, but what's happening out of Washington, D.C. is a danger to our Christian faith. It has, by drawing in so many Christians, I think it has perverted the way Christianity is understood and practiced in our United States. And there are many people, including people who are watching this morning, or any time you watch this, people who have said to me, I cannot tolerate what the Christians have done in our country. I can't even be associated with them anymore. This is one reason many of you have quit associating, quit going to church, because you don't like what the Christian community has done to support this political regime. I share that concern. And here we are trying to, as a family, my family, there are four of us, and on any given subject, we have three opinions. And I don't mean just opinions. I mean emotion. strength. We have convictions about it. We sometimes raise our voices. And so we challenge each other. And so when we got together this week over in the mountains of North Carolina, a beautiful part of the country, we traveled around the community over by Waynesville and Maggie Valley. Some of you have been there. Lake Junaluska, many of the Methodist people have been to Lake Junaluska because that's where their national conference center is. But we started talking Thursday evening about all the politics. I didn't know whether we could handle it. We had come into this gathering kind of being careful of what we were saying to one another. We didn't want to offend each other. We didn't want to get angry with each other, but we ended up talking for 4 hours about these things. Frank, blunt, emotional. A lot of what we shared, some of it was ignorance. We had to eventually confess that we didn't know as much as we thought, and that our information was limited. We were making judgments based upon too little information, too much rumor. And as the night wore on, we began to say, why don't we focus on finding things that we agree on? And we began to list all the things dealing with immigration and democracy and politics and law and the federal budget, all the things that have dominated American political discourse. And we discovered how much we agree on, what similar values we have. And I think that marathon conversation, and then we did it again yesterday afternoon, a marathon conversation, trying to sort through things and listen to one another. I tell you this story not only because it's sibling day, and 3 people that I love very deeply and dearly. I want to encourage you to sit down with people that perhaps you think you disagree with, that who have different opinions, different ideas, and sit down not so much to understand, for them to understand you, but for you to understand them. To listen sympathetically to what they think and feel, what they're afraid of, what they aspire to. This is what, if we can do this around the dinner tables of our own families, we can do this as a country. If we can do this as extended families, cousins and aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters and parents and children, this will be a way forward for our country, because we need to find a way to come together and practice our democracy in the deepest and truest sense, and protect people and honor people who are different than we are. It reminds me years ago when I was a student, a doctoral student, I spent some time in the graduate school of Notre Dame University, one of the great graduate schools and universities in our country. And I had a teacher, Dr. Enda McDonough, and he was a specialist in the Northern Ireland. And there were 10 of us in the class, 10 graduate students, 2 Protestants, I was one of them, and 8 Catholics. Over and over again, he said, if we're going to be faithful theologians and faithful ministers, we must emphasize the things that we have in common. That's resonated in my spirit and in my mind and in my vocation as a minister all these years. I want to honor him. I want to honor my siblings. And thank my siblings, my brother and 2 sisters, for coming this way, for watching this morning. A shout out to all 3 of you. And for everybody who tries to stay on speaking terms with their brothers and sisters. Let's resolve to do that as a way of leading our own nation forward. Thank you for joining me today. Share this video. It's archived, of course, on YouTube, on my website, themeetinghouse.net, and here on Facebook for 3 or 4 weeks on Facebook. Write me. Let me know what you think. Post on Facebook, call me, send me a message, send me an email, subscribe to my weekly newsletter, and stay in touch with me. I will respond to anything you ask about this broadcast or any broadcast. My intent is to communicate with you, to listen to you, and to speak for you in a way that's inspirational, in a way that's instructional, in a way that gives you courage, that you might be a source of courage and inspiration to somebody else in your life. God bless you today on this Palm Sunday. May you be safe. May you be centered. May you be strong. And may God bless you. I'll see you next week for Sunday in the House.